All right, we are here to talk injuries. Not necessarily just pitcher injuries. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff. We got 3 different categories, but before we get into that, we got guys who never came back from their injuries, guys who are coming off surgeries this offseason, guys who dealt with injuries last season but then returned, how we're looking at them for 2026, what our expectations are. First, why don't you guys introduce yourself, tell the people why they want to know your opinion about this. Steven, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. I guess this is my 3rd or 4th year being involved with PitchCon. It's always fun. I'm usually doing it from Japan with Nick as a little bit of a Q&A, but a little different format this year, which I'm looking forward to. I'm actually an injury epidemiologist. I studied pitching injuries actually for my doctoral dissertation, and that led to a grant from USA Baseball, which led to pitch count limits. And I've consulted with a couple of major league teams, insurance underwriters, different things on player contracts and that sort of thing. So, but I've been a fantasy baseball player for decades now. So always glad to
And
help
the
out the community.
only reason I had you introduce yourself is I don't know how to epidemiologist. That's how you say that word.
That's
I had
right.
no idea that it was in your bio, and I was like, I can't. That's too much for me. I can't get to that one. So, Dave, Dr. Dave, introduce yourself.
Yeah, so unlike Dr. Lyman, I am not actually a doctor. It was actually back when I kind of came on the scene, I talked a lot about injuries because I'm a high stakes fantasy baseball player. It's what has always given me an edge over the rest of the field, in my opinion. And a lot of people were not open to hearing about injury risk being something we can study and look into. So I kind of got mocked a lot for it and kind of got called Dr. Dave. So I just kind of adopted the moniker. Then I'm like, all right, I'll go with that because, I've used it since 2019. I've got a 71% cash rate and a 36% win rate in high stakes leagues. So I feel like I kind of know what I'm talking about on this, but it's different than Dr. Lyman. I'm more looking at historically, I see things and then I say, okay, here's how that's turned out in the past, where he could actually tell you why that's happening. And for me, I don't really care why. I just care, okay, he's got a flexor strain that usually leads to Tommy John surgery. So I just kind of, I keep track of all that stuff from years of tracking injuries, and it's really helped me.
Yeah, and that's one thing I always point out when we have these discussions. I'm Chris Towers. I co-host the Fantasy Baseball Today podcast with CBS Sports, a bunch of stuff over there. And the way I always talk about it, this is both for baseball and football when I was writing about that, is we are so good at quantifying so much about this game. And then so much of the injury discussion is just vibes. And so I think we're scientific. We got pitch tunneling and seam shifted wake and all this stuff, and then injuries is I think he's going to stay healthy. I don't know. So I hope we can all learn something from this discussion. Certainly, I hope I can learn something from this discussion. And I think we are going to kick it off with a guy that I just genuinely have no idea what to do with for 2026, and that's Zach Wheeler, who, when he was right, I think he was on a Hall of Fame path. I think, it was a late start to the career, but the last 7 seasons, he's been one of the 3 or 4 best pitchers in baseball pretty much every year. He has the blood clot last season. That was super scary. Turns out that was a result of needing thoracic outlet syndrome. There is a difference between the venous thoracic outlet syndrome and the neurogenic. Typically, I think we see it more with the nerve pinch. Josh Beckett was one that I remember that kind of derailed his career towards the end. Wheeler in a different bucket with the vein thoracic outlet syndrome. Steven, I don't know if you can explain the distinction here and what we're looking at as far as Wheeler's outcome, because it seems like one of the big wild cards, not just for fantasy, where his ADP is right around 150, but for real life. I mean, the Phillies, they're ace. That might be the difference between this team being a contender and not.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point. As you've mentioned, this isn't an injury. At least generally, these thoracic outlet syndrome injuries, players don't have a great track record of recovering from. Another example would be Matt Harvey, whose career was also derailed by this. So whenever I hear those words, I'm pretty nervous about both ability to return and if they return, how their performance is going to be. Venus may make it a little bit different. I'm actually not I focus more on soft tissue injuries
Sure.
and ligaments and tendons. And so when you get into the bloodstream, it's not quite my area of expertise. So maybe I'll defer on that. Dave, in your work, is there data that reflects differences between venous and the alternative?
I was actually on RotoWire with James Anderson earlier this offseason talking about the difference between venous TOS and neurogenic TOS. And so like neurogenic TOS is basically a death knell. You know, it's what we saw with Steven Strasburg and Chris Archer. But when you're looking at, venous, we had Matt Harvey, as you mentioned, and Jaime Garcia. They never made it back from venous TOS. Daniel Bard returned, but 6 years later. And then you had, on the positive side, you had Alex Cobb and Merrill Kelly. And Cobb came back and pitched 136 innings. Merrill Kelly pitched 158 innings after. So with their skills intact, too, like there wasn't really a significant skills drop-off. So we have seen some success stories. But it's just one of those things that it's okay to take a shot on Zach Wheeler, but because obviously the upside's huge there with if he makes it back. But, don't have super high expectations. Don't draft him along with a bunch of other injury risks too. You have to kind of form the correct team around him, and don't draft him too early. Like around the 9th, maybe 10th round in a 15-team league would be about the time that I would start considering him. But we'll have to see what the news says as we get closer to spring training.
Yeah, that is right around the ADP, 150.4 overall in the NFBC drafts that have been going on so far. Obviously, that will and can change over the next couple of weeks as we get other sources of data, but everything we have right now says he's around 150. And, you look at the other pitchers going there, and it's Robbie Ray and Gavin Williams, Sandy Alcantara, Trey Savage, Shane Bieber, who we're going to talk about a little later. I think that's probably the right range for the risk reward here, because do we still think a top 12 season is reasonable for Zach Wheeler?
Top 12
as a best case, yeah.
Ooh, that's aggressive.
Might be asking too much.
I would think
so.
Yeah. All right. But if you get 150 very good innings from Zach Wheeler at the 150th pick, I think there's a lot of risk there, but I think the reward could be worth it. Let's move on to Spencer Schwellenbach, another one that this is a guy who transitioned from shortstop to starting pitcher when he got drafted, had not put together very many innings, was a late bloomer, really, really good, had Tommy John surgery coming out of college. Last season, he adds about 1.5 miles per hour to his fastball, and he fractures his elbow from pitching, which I have no idea if this is right, but that sounds terrifying.
Yeah.
It sounds like something is like fundamentally wrong there from my perspective. But then I look at Michael King as another guy who had a similar injury and made the transition from the bullpen to the rotation a couple years ago and has been awesome, at least when he's been healthy himself. So where are we at on Spencer Schwellenbach? Well, we'll start with Steven here.
Yeah, I actually don't have much concern with him coming into the season. He seems to have had a good recovery. Typically fractures are something that will heal, and bone tends to heal actually stronger than it was before the fracture. So unless he had a complication, I wouldn't be too worried about that. That would be my perspective on him.
What about you, Dave?
I mean, so obviously every fractured elbow is different. I was very interested to hear what Dr. Lyman was going to say here. But looking at the history of guys with fractured elbows, from Dave Dravecki, Archie Bradley, Joel Zumaya, and Gavin Floyd, they never pitched again. I don't think he's on that trajectory, but Dan Winkler returned after 16 months. And granted, some of these guys, it was a while back, and I don't know if there's been, significant progression in the surgeries and whatnot since then. But when Michael King returned after the fractured elbow, he missed 7 months, and when he returned, his K rate was down 4%, and his velo was down 1.7 miles an hour. He converted to being a starter, where his velo and K rate dropped even further. So even though he was an eventual success story, I don't like Schwellenbach for this year based on the historical results here. So I don't know. He could be fine, but I don't think you'll see him on any of my teams.
Dr. Lyman, the one question that I have with Schwellenbach is he's talked a lot about he was kind of pushing his velocity. And I wonder how much of it is just he was putting too much stress on him. And is that the thing we should watch going into spring training for Spencer Schwellenbach? Is can he hold the velocity in check in order to keep himself healthy, because we saw in 2024 he was really good without averaging 97 on his fastball.
My guess is that that's the guidance he's been getting from his medical team and from his coaches, is that he probably will need to dial it back a little bit in order to maintain. But from what I've read about him, it does seem like he's on track for a return this season.
Should be back. Let's move on to Jared Jones, who was one of the top pitching prospects in baseball in 2024. He had internal brace procedure surgery in May of last season. Now, we're still kind of new to the internal brace procedure. There have not been, we've got hundreds of examples of Tommy John surgery. We can be pretty confident that we know how that's going to go, at least in the aggregate. Internal brace, there's, maybe dozens of major league or minor league pitchers who have had it. I know Brian Wu is a real success story. He had it in college. But last year, we saw Spencer Strider come back from the internal brace procedure and just was not at all the same. Is that, we've got some other guys coming back from that specific surgery, so we can kind of apply this analysis across the board, but just, are we at a point where we can say one way or the other about the efficacy of the internal brace procedure, how likely guys are to get back to being who they were, and specifically with Jared Jones, who was good and certainly promising as a rookie, but is not proven yet. So Dr. Lyman, what are your thoughts on just the internal brace procedure in general here?
I think you're absolutely spot on. We don't have a lot of information about how this procedure performs. We do know that the Tommy John procedure is tried and true at this point, and early on that didn't perform very well, and it's gotten progressively better. Now it's a pretty successful surgery, I think we can say. So I think there's a little bit of risk. I think the advantage of the internal brace, and the reason so many players opt for it, is because it's quicker recovery, right? They can get back on the field faster, less time off, and then they're taking that risk, right? So hard to say. I think, and I'm going to say this with a number of the pitchers that we'll talk about, so I may as well get it out there. You got to keep an eye on them hitting their rehab milestones, and when they start facing live batters, when they appear in spring games, if they appear in spring games, that's going to tell you a lot about how long it's going to be before they're back in the major leagues and pitching.
In Jones's case, he had the surgery in May. Last year, 2 years ago, Spencer Strider had his in April. He was pitching in spring training towards the end, got back into games, I think, around the end of April. So if you assume a similar timetable, maybe Jared Jones begins a minor league rehab assignment in April. He's one that the price is very cheap for Jared Jones. It's in NFBC, he's the 176th pitcher drafted on average. So, you give me Slade Ciccone or Jared Jones, I will just take the chance that Jared Jones can live up to some upside there. But my expectations aren't super high, and maybe that's just anchoring too much on the Spencer Strider disaster last year, where by the end of spring, we saw him in one game and everybody was like, cool. He struck out 9 minor leaguers on the Red Sox. He's a top 60 pick again. I think we kind of overreacted on that one. But Dave, I'm interested in your thoughts on Jared Jones. Is he someone? The price is so cheap that if you're in a league with IL spots, I think you just take the flyer on him anyway, right?
Well, if you're thinking of it that way, where you have IL slots, you could make an argument for anybody as long as you're not using a high pick on them. So from that perspective, yes. But I won't probably have any Jared Jones on my team. You might be surprised to realize that there's actually been 59 instances of the internal brace surgery since 2016 it goes back to. But what there haven't been.
Is that double counting? Because I know Jacob deGrom, I think, had Tommy John and the internal brace to stabilize it, I think is the way they refer to it.
deGrom is not on the list.
Okay, so 59 who have just had, because they are different. Sometimes a lot of guys are getting the hybrid now. If they're getting the full Tommy John, they get the internal brace on top of it. Yeah.
So, I mean, with Jared Jones, I mean, you mentioned Strider last year. I'm not just looking at the surface stats. I'm looking underneath. So swing strike rate and Ks were way down. Giolito, same thing, came back from the internal brace. Ks were way down last year. Tyler Wells barely pitched. Patrick Sandoval didn't make it back. Rasmussen's the only real success story, and while his surface numbers were good, under the hood he had regressed quite a bit as well. And he didn't pitch that many innings after coming back either. I think it was 29 innings his first year back. So I'm not high on Jared Jones. I understand it. I get the thought, but really, the best players in fantasy baseball are not the ones who are taking home run swings all the time. It's the people who are taking productive players instead.
Now, I guess the follow-up question, is there anyone we're going to be talking about here who you will be drafting today, this season?
We will get to some, yes.
All right. One guy I love and I think is really, I'm going to say undervalued, but maybe you guys will talk me out of it. But Chris Bubic, 219 in ADP right now, the number 84 pitcher in these NFBC drafts. He dealt with the rotator cuff strain last season. He threw 116 innings with a 2.55 ERA. I believe in if the talent is what it was last season, I totally believe in it. I know he doesn't throw hard, but the fastball's got great shape. The changeup is awesome. The questions I have are one, just how big of a concern is coming back from the rotator cuff strain last season, and two, the Royals season was over by the time he got hurt in July, I think. Is it possible he could have come back from that and they just held him back because there was no point? They were already talking about having to limit his innings because he had only thrown, I think, 55 the previous year. I really like Chris Bubic. I think he's absolutely worth the price. Do either of you want to talk me out of it?
I mean, so rotator cuff strains can be tricky because sometimes guys come back with no issue, and then other times there's complications and re-aggravation. I read a study that examined professional pitchers who had rotator cuff tears on an MRI, and they were reevaluated 2 years later. 75% of the pitchers had a progression of their tear, and of those whose tear progressed, 87% had an increase of at least 1 grade, 13% at least 2 grades. Noticeable statistics are the decrease in innings pitched after the injury. WHIP and ERA estimators also increased. It appears that after the initial rotator cuff tear, the pitchers saw a significant decrease in their individual pitching performance. So, yeah, I mean, it's all about when you're taking him and whether you've your roster construction is such that you can afford to take a risk. I think this is less of a risk than the other guys we've talked about because some people do come back from rotator cuffs just fine. I'm interested to hear what Dr. Lyman has to say, but I'm not going to talk you out of it. But I'm just going to say, don't put him and Jared Jones and all these other guys on the same roster.
Well, and I do think it's worth noting that, Dave, you play a lot of high stakes, and on the NFBC platform, the one thing you don't get
is IL
spots.
Yep.
And a lot of those leagues are 15-team leagues, so you're already playing in a deeper player pool than most.
Losing players means so much more there. Like, you cannot take all these risks. So, yes, it is different when you have IL slots, but again, you just don't want to pack them all on.
Well, and let's say you got 5 IL spots to start your season. You draft 3 guys who are on the IL to open the season.
Yeah.
2 guys are going to get hurt in spring training at least.
Exactly.
And then the first 2 weeks of the season, we have this discussion every year. April, oh my God, this is the worst year for injuries ever. And that's just what April is. That's just everybody gets hurt in April. It's true in every sport. The first couple of weeks of camp or games are always when there's the highest injury occurrences. So you have to keep that in mind. But Dr. Lyman, what are your thoughts on Bubic? Would you take him if the price remains outside of the top 200?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's priced appropriately for what he might give you with the injury risk on top of that. And I say it every year, and I'll say it again this year, pitching is attrition. I think Nick has promised me a T-shirt at some point, but I think it really is, you're not going to finish the season with the pitchers you started with because so many of them are going to end up lost. And so really any pitcher is healthy until he's not. And what I worry about with cuff injuries in particular is they are career ending very often. So if you have the surgery, you're probably not going to come back and pitch effectively. If you don't have the surgery, you will have progression of your cuff tear because that's just the nature of those injuries. I have a rotator cuff tear. I've never had surgery on it. I don't like throwing a baseball because my shoulder hurts. So it's just not something. I'd rather have a pitcher with an elbow injury history than with a cuff injury history. Okay. But in a redraft, he's probably fine if the price is right.
Yeah, on the attrition point, I'm a Marlins fan. Dave, I know you're a Guardians fan, right?
Yeah.
I have gone into several seasons where everybody's like, the Marlins have too much pitching. Where's everybody going to pitch? And I've seen a lot of bad starts from Marlins pitchers who nobody thought was on the radar. So that is the nature of the, like, I think the incident rate in any given season for starting pitchers on the IL is something like 45%. It's just, you are not guaranteed to get hurt if you're a pitcher in any given season. You are guaranteed to get hurt eventually. Our arms are not supposed to be throwing things in that manner that hard. And on that topic, Shane McClanahan, who was one of the most exciting pitchers in baseball, had Tommy John surgery in 2024, had a nerve-related arm surgery in 2025, just could not get past the nerve issue last season. This is another one where the price is the 94th pitcher, 253 in ADP. I just don't know. One, the injury risk, but two, just I think he's a second Tommy John surgery guy. He's had all these nerve issues. I just don't know if the upside's there for Shane McClanahan, unfortunately. Dr. Lyman, what are your thoughts on Shane O'Mac?
Yeah, players that are out for multiple, especially pitchers out for multiple seasons, really worry me. So I would stay away and wait for him to get back on the mound and pitching in major league games and see how he's pitching if he does. A lot of these guys just never make it back. So I think I'd look elsewhere.
Dave, you're out?
I don't have anything to add. Yeah, I'm way out.
What about Grant Holmes? Another Braves had a lot go wrong with their pitching staff. He was a highlight at first, but an elbow sprain ended his 2025. He was also, I think, throwing a little harder before he got hurt. He's expected to be ready for opening day. It's not 100% clear if he's going to be in the rotation. They might just be better off leaving him in the bullpen, but he's a guy that again is so cheap. I'm kind of interested in taking that late round flyer if he wins a job out of spring. But am I being too optimistic about the chances of him being effective this year?
Yes. The quote was, he elected to treat his right elbow injury with rest and rehab rather than undergoing Tommy John surgery. I could not be more out. I don't think he's going to pitch hardly at all this year.
Nothing to add.
All right, let's talk about some hitters. Austin Riley, coming back from core muscle surgery, he has struggled over the past couple of seasons. He had a hand injury or a wrist injury in 2024 as well. The production hasn't quite been there the past couple of years. The underlying numbers starting to take a hit. I'm just a little wary of Riley in general, but is core muscle surgery something we should be concerned about? I know it's all rotations for hitters. Is this something we should worry might carry over into 2026?
I would keep an eye on, again, his rehab milestones and what he's doing in spring. And if you're getting him at a discount, he may be worth taking a flyer on. I feel better about hitters coming back from surgery than I do pitchers generally. But you're right, with core muscles, this is often what brings down hitters during a season. But I don't know, Dave, in your data, have you looked at whether or not those carry over after surgery?
I haven't really noticed much with the core muscle surgery. I've seen a lot of guys come back successfully from it, so I don't really have any red flags here.
Okay. I've got Ozzy Albies next, and I don't know, maybe this might be oversimplifying it. Can we just get this guy some more milk? He has had, I think, 4 broken bones in the past 2 years. He had a broken foot a couple years ago. It was the wrist last season. And what was really frustrating about Ozzy Albies' 2025 season was, and he talked about this, he just had no power coming back from that wrist surgery. And you saw in his swing, his right-handed swing, which is where he gets all of his production from, basically. Ozzy Albies, it's just hold your own against righties and crush lefties. And last season, for the first couple of months, he couldn't do anything against lefties. He gets really hot in July. He says he's starting to feel better. He's back to full strength coming off wrist surgery. And then he has the hamate bone injury in September. Now, he should be fully healed well before spring training. That's, I think, an 8-week injury usually. But is the fact that he's had multiple hand injuries in recent years something we should be concerned about? Or do we think Ozzy Albies is just kind of good to go for 2026? What do you think, Dr. Lyman?
I would, hamate surgery tends to be definitive. Like, players recover from that and they're back to doing fun
just get it
things
out there
on the field. But there are times when there is complications, but I think we'd learn about that early on in his spring training.
Dave, are you in or out on Ozzy Albies this year?
I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure yet. I really like his price where he's going, so I think I'm more in than out. But typically coming off of shoulder, hitters coming off of shoulder and wrist surgeries experience power outage the following year. However, Zach Neto came back last year and his power was there. So, it's there's never anything that's always one way. There's always an exception that proves the rule. But I think for where he's going, I'd be okay. I think, like Dr. Lyman was saying, I think we want to see more information and see how he looks in spring training first. But I'm kind of on the fence with him.
Yeah, when we were talking about, back in September on the FBT pod, we were talking about like trying to get ahead of our rankings and who's going to go where. And I was ready to rank Ozzy Albies as like my number 4 or number 5 second baseman before the hamate bone injury. And he's number 9 in ADP. I kind of feel like I should just rank him where I was going to, but I can't quite get there. And I don't need to, is part of the thing, is that the price is so reasonable right now, 163 in ADP. That just feels like, just take the chance. Because second base is so weak. There are so few players that have the kind of upside he has, especially if that lineup clicks again. So I like Albies a lot. Let's move on to Justin Steele, another guy coming back from internal brace. And I think his was just the internal brace. He had it in April. He made 4 starts last season. This was one, Dave, I assume you were out on Justin Steele last year, coming back from, he had the elbow sprain in September and then didn't have anything done to it. Makes it through 4 starts.
The biggest mistake I see fantasy players make is they assume when there's an injury at the end of the season or at any point in the season, but they don't get any kind of treatment or surgery on it, they assume like, oh, they've got the whole offseason, so they're going to be good to go come spring. No, it does not work that way. The issue is underlying. It's still there. And so, yeah, way out on Steele. And honestly, unless Dr. Lyman convinces me otherwise, I'm still out on him.
I mean, this is his second time needing elbow, or he had Tommy John originally, I think 2017, and now he's back at it. So I'm out on him as well. I agree.
Now, that does bring up a question for a player we were going to get to later, but I think it's important to talk about him now because, Dave, you brought up a point about it, and that's Cole Reagans, who missed a bunch of time last season with a rotator cuff strain in his left shoulder. But what I like, and maybe I'm off base here, but what I like is that we did see him come back at the end of the season. I think he made 3 starts in September, looked unbelievably good because Cole Reagans always looks really good. He is an awesome pitcher. Does that change it at all? Would you rather see the guy like Cole Reagans come back and make a few starts and look like themselves, look like the injury is at least not limiting them? Does that change your view on these discussions at all, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, you'd rather see them come back than not come back. With Cole Reagans, it's tough though because he's a guy who's also had 2 Tommy John surgeries. He's coming.
Although in his case, I think one of them was like the surgery. It was, yeah. I think he re-injured the elbow while the recovery or the surgery went wrong in some way. So that was it wasn't like he pitched for 3 years and then tore the UCL again.
I don't know. He had one in 2018 and then one in 2019. I don't know if you can count it as just one surgery, if he had 2 different surgeries, even though it was only within a year of each other. Maybe Dr. Lyman can speak to that. But I still feel like he definitely has increased risk. And right now he's going end of the 3rd round, early 4th, and come main events in NFBC, he'll be going in the 2nd round, honestly. So I don't expect to have any Cole Reagans. I think people are putting too much stock into small samples. Early in the draft, I want to get my foundational pieces that are, I don't need the highest upside guys. I want the guys that I can rely on. Later, I can take risks. I can take a guy like Zach Wheeler in the 10th round where if it doesn't work out, I'm still okay because I've built that foundation on safer players.
There's a decent chance your 10th round pick's not going to work out anyway.
Yeah, true.
Dr. Lyman, how are you viewing a pitcher like Cole Reagans coming back?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about rotator cuffs earlier, and they're just they don't heal, and they have a good chance of getting worse. So he might pitch fine for 6 months, a year, but it just feels like a ticking time bomb. And with 2 Tommy Johns, and if they had it in 18 and 19, that suggests that the first one was a failed procedure.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
the first, so I would count that as a revision. So he's an injury risk for sure. And if he's going that high in drafts, I wouldn't have any shares of him either. And I don't even play for money. So
yeah, he is the number 18 pitcher, 56.2. Like Dave said, that price is going to keep rising because you just look at the rate stats for Cole Ring. I think it was a 38% strikeout rate last season. He was just an absolute monster when he was on the mound. So I would love for him to stay healthy, but we've got enough early round pitchers this year that carries an incredible amount of risk to begin with. And yeah, that I really want to be in, and I'll play 14 leagues. I want to make sure I have him in one, just out of FOMO alone. But if you're playing one league, I don't think that can be your one ace just because of the risk there. We got a couple other guys. Max Meyer, he's coming back from hip surgery. I actually don't know if Max Meyer matters, even if he's healthy. I'm a Marlins fan. I've never been particularly impressed with him. I think he's a bullpen arm. But if you guys think there's any chance Max Meyer matters coming back from hip surgery, feel free to chime in. Otherwise, we can move right on. We're moving right on to Joe Musgrove coming back from Tommy John surgery back in October of 2024. This is a very similar timetable to Sandy Alcantara, who had his surgery in September of 2023. I think the bigger question here is not so much health.
Yeah.
It's rust, right? Like, are we going to see the 3 months of putrid performance from Joe Musgrove that we got out of Sandy Alcantara last year? That's the question for me. But does having the surgery further removed, Dr. Lyman, make you feel better about someone like Musgrove coming into the season?
These are actually the guys that I prefer when it comes to pitchers coming back from Tommy John. I do expect that the performance may not be there in his early starts. So I wouldn't take him too high, but if he is showing improvement throughout the season, then, you stick with him. And if not, you can let him go. What's his ADP? I'd imagine it's pretty low.
258.4. That feels, he's cheaper than Shane McClanahan. I would personally much rather take the chance on Joe Musgrove than Shane McClanahan. How about you?
Yep.
Dave, are you in on Joe Musgrove?
No, I won't have Musgrove. I mean, like, May will be 18 months. That's about the time where we're looking at timeline-wise coming back from Tommy John. And I expect him to struggle with command and control for at least, usually I think it's 100 days. So that'll be like a little over 3 months. And you're by the end, I'm sure he could easily be good at some point in the second half of the season, but that's just not what I'm looking for. I want guys who are going to come out of the gate healthy, ready to go.
Let someone else get the bad months, and you can swoop in when they drop them, right? Let's move on to guys coming off of surgery this offseason that we haven't seen yet. And the first one is a guy who I thought was really impressive last season, Carlos Rodon. He had an elbow cleanup surgery, so I think it was loose bodies in his elbow getting cleaned up. He's expected to be back by May-ish, I think. But I tend to view, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I tend to view these cleanup procedures where it's just getting loose bodies or debridement from bone spurs as less serious. But I don't actually, personally, I have no data to indicate that one way or the other. Dr. Lyman, is my hunch correct there?
Yes, when I see bone spurs or debridement as the reason for their surgery, I'm not worried about them the way that I would be with a soft tissue injury. It just suggests that they've done damage to their elbow, which we know that they've done because they pitch. So, and there's a number of hitters also that are coming off that off-season procedure, and I'm not worried about them either.
Okay. And Carlos Rodon's ADP right now is 193. So you got to factor in a missed month. You got to factor in some risk. Dave, is Rodon on your list or no?
I mean, the elbow cleanup surgery isn't a huge deal. Sometimes there are complications. I've seen it with a bunch of other guys. Shane Baz started with that, led to Tommy John. Vance Worley barely pitched the next season. His skills were way down. But I mean, even if he's okay, I just don't like drafting pitchers that I'm going to be starting with on the IL. And they say May, but sometimes May becomes June, becomes July. You know, never pay attention when teams say we hope to have him back by May.
Sure.
That means June at least, if not July. So I don't know. I don't expect to have him. I think he's a good candidate if you're in an IL league. I think he'd be a good candidate to put on the IL.
Yeah, he's actually over the past couple of years become a very reliable source of innings. At least I think the production has been frustrating at times. He's one of these pitchers. It's like him and Blake Snell and Dylan Cease. I can't watch them pitch because there's the process of watching them pitch is maddening. I can't watch guys who don't have good command, I think is what it comes down to. I just like they've got no idea where it's going. Carlos Rodon's bouncing change-ups like 40 feet in front of the plate. It's always a tough watch. His teammate Garrett Cole, also coming back from elbow surgery. His was Tommy John with the internal brace last March. Again, we're saying May. You know, that'd be about 14 months removed. I genuinely don't know. When healthy, Garrett Cole was, you know, arguably the best pitcher in baseball. Was coming off of a Cy Young season, and we've seen some declining stats over the past couple of seasons. The strikeout rate has not been quite as good when he's been healthy the last couple of years. He is 36, I think, or 34. You could see a world where the Yankees he gets on the mound late May. They just let him go. He's the horse the rest of the way. They limit him early. How likely is that actually, Dr. Lyman?
I think that's very, very optimistic. And I think he's going to be 35, actually. So you were right on either side of that. But, you know, amazing pitcher, you know, for most of his career. But I think we've probably had his best days behind him. But then what I'm actually thinking he might be a nice candidate for 2027 rather than a 2026 play, because he'll be more fully recovered. He'll have you know, shown what he can do to some degree. And, you know, we have some other examples of pitchers who pitched into their 40s after having TJ in their mid to late 30s. So it's possible.
Justin Verlander just did it. Won a Cy Young a couple of years ago coming off Tommy John surgery. Yeah, Garrett Cole, look, the ADP is around 300 right now. So, again, if you're in an IL league, I think part of the problem with going into the season with a Garrett Cole, or, you know, especially a Garrett Cole, where it's not just, is he going to pitch? Is he going to pitch well? You're going to get injuries along the way. And it gets harder to justify stashing these guys when we don't know what the timetable is. Dave, any chance you'll take that flyer on Garrett Cole?
I'll give you one guess. No, I'm out on all internal brace guys until I see some success stories. But in general, guys, it's pretty simple. When don't draft guys returning from Tommy John surgery the season that they return. Wait until the next year, like Dr. Lyman said. That's the year that they're probably going to be coming at a low point in the ADP because they're coming off probably a crappy season, and they're fully healthy by that point. So don't take them this year. Wait till 2027, then take them.
All right, we got Anthony Volpe coming back from shoulder surgery. I just don't know if Anthony Volpe, he'll steal some bases, but the Yankees, I feel like they've just kind of screwed up his development, and he's screwed with his swing a lot, and it just there's very little to be optimistic about with Anthony Volpe. But, you know, maybe this explains why last season was so mediocre for him. I don't really know if the juice is worth the squeeze there. You guys have anything to add on Anthony Volpe? Any interest at all? Or have you seen Anthony Volpe hit?
I mean, he was injured. He was injured early in the season, so, you know, and that would linger. But again, shoulders can bother hitters as well as pitchers. So I would, again, wait and see how he performs in this season before going back in on him.
Now,
and
this is
already struggling with his swing with a shoulder injury now. It's, you know, it's just one more complication, and the fact that he won't be back until May or June, I don't see any reason to draft him.
Hey, maybe it's a rookie of the year situation, and he needed to hurt his shoulder to get his swing back. Maybe that'll do it. One guy I am very optimistic about for this season. I think the kind of iffiness of his 2025 campaign, one, has been overstated. William Contreras was awesome last season. He was just slightly less awesome than the previous year, and I think the fact that he had a finger injury that he was playing through explains it. He fractured his finger in like May, was really bad for the next couple of months, Second half, looked like himself. He's the third catcher off the board in ADP. I think we have collectively jumped the shark on Ben Rice's price as a top 50 pick. His ADP in January, 45.7, 6 picks ahead of William Contreras. I will take William Contreras. I don't know about you guys. You have any concerns about William Contreras?
Nope.
No.
Didn't think so. Ivan Herrera, he's coming back from elbow surgery. The underlying numbers that Ivan Herrera has put up look like a top 20 hitter in baseball for any position. He's entering the season with only util eligibility, but he's expected to play catcher for the Cardinals. I think Ivan Herrera might be a good enough hitter that if he's just util only, he still has value for fantasy. But obviously, we get a couple weeks in the season and you can slide him into your catcher spot. That could be huge. His price going up quite a bit. Let me make sure I have it. In the month of January, he is up to 151.1, the number 91 hitter. I think that's fine, even coming back from elbow surgery. What do you guys think about Ivan Herrera?
Yeah, this was another one of those clean out procedures, and I'm even more optimistic with hitters than I am with pitchers when it comes to just removing bone spurs or debridement. So I think he's good to go, and look to see if he's catching in spring. That'll tell it.
Yep, I agree.
I think the only thing is, can he hold up as a catcher? Well, I just want to see him get 10 games at catcher, and that's all I care about. Let me slot him into my catcher spot. And I don't care if he's a DH the rest of the season, because he played through the elbow injury last season. He was playing through a knee issue that was limiting him, and he just crushed the ball. So I'm a big Ivan Herrera fan. I think if he was catcher eligible, I don't know, man, I might rank him ahead of Ben Rice. I think he's just a phenomenal hitter. We got Caleb Durbin and Francisco Lindor both coming back from elbow debridements. That's one with Lindor where his price is where it always is, if not a little higher, 16.7 ADP. He's always right around that 1-2 turn. He's coming back from elbow surgery. He was not able to get insurance for the World Baseball Classic, so he will not be representing Puerto Rico. I know he's been very upset about that. Is there any reason to downgrade him slightly because of this? I know the debridement we think tends to be a little less concerning, but is it just, I don't know, I can't get over, should we be spending our first round pick on a guy coming back from surgery? That's the thing I come back to with Lindor. Is there at least added risk coming off of this kind of surgery, Dr. Lyman?
I think where the risk is what you mentioned, that he is a very high draft pick, and are you willing to take that chance? Generally, this is a procedure that works well for hitters, but when you're talking about that kind of premium, I'd probably want to get him in the second round, not the first, if he was somebody I was targeting. But again, it's better than some of the other injuries he could have been dealing with.
Sure. Dave, I know you're a big proponent of not taking on that early round risk. Do you think Lindor is an early round risk?
Not really. I mean, okay. I don't think the elbow debridement for a hitter should be anything really to be super concerned with. And he's more of an early second round pick than a first round pick. But I mean, you want your first 2-3 picks to be solid. I haven't seen anything to show me that's a concern. But as of now, I have no problem with taking Lindor.
Okay. A guy I would be actually kind of excited about is Jeff McNeil. Got traded to the A's. I love the ballpark. I think there's a chance that we are just, as fantasy players, collectively under appreciating how ridiculous a place Sacramento was for hitters last season. And it kind of it's not quite Coors Field, but it might be on its own level after Coors Field. And I just don't know with a hitter coming back from thoracic outlet syndrome if there's actually a path to that kind of upside. What do you guys think on that one? Because we typically talk about it with pitchers.
Right.
But he did have that surgery as well. Dr. Lyman.
I'm not really familiar with the recovery for that for a hitter, but he is in his mid-30s, and he's generally been a middle infielder for a lot of his career, so I'm not sure how much he's got left in the tank. But you're right, the ballpark is great. So if the price is right, and again, you have... Sorry, go ahead. I'm finished.
Yeah, he's one that he's been one of these bat speed gainers the past year and a half that I've been interested in. There were signs of it working out last season. They are talking about him as if he's just their opening day second baseman from what I've seen. He's super cheap, but if there's no upside there, there's no upside there. Right, Dave?
I mean, it's a great park, but for power, but like, was he going to go from 12 to 16? Like the upside just isn't really there with McNeil, so I'll probably just stay away.
All right, we got Lawrence Butler, who had patellar tendon repair surgery in October. He was the hyped guy this time last year. Everybody was pushing him up their draft boards. It was a disappointing season, but was still useful for fantasy. Do we think maybe the knee injuries explain why he was so disappointing? I don't know. What do you guys think about that? And the possibility, I guess it would be kind of silly to call it a bounce back season from a guy who's never done it, but a bounce back to the things people hoped he might do last year. Where do you land on that, Dr. Lyman?
Yeah, these patellar tendon injuries worry me to some degree. But I think with a player like him, where it's really going to worry me is with his speed. So in the season before his injury, he was 18 out of 18 on the base paths. And then he apparently was playing through this injury for a lot of last season, and he was caught stealing 7 times on 29 attempts. So we may see him running less. He might not be that 20-20, 30-30 candidate that we all hope he would become if the knee's continuing to bother him. If it heals well, then and he starts running in spring, that might tell you something. But I would expect them to take it easy on the base pass with him.
What do you think, Dave?
Same. I had the same notes as Dr. Lyman, and basically he already can't hit lefties, so I think he could be a platoon candidate on top of that. So I just don't see myself taking Butler, even though I was very in on him last year. I was very wrong.
Let's move on to players who dealt with injuries last season but returned, and one that I think we got to talk about first is Blake Snell, who we got some details recently in the past couple of days. I have thought Blake Snell is just overrated for fantasy to begin with. He was a top 20 SP. This is a guy who has been a top 30 SP in his career twice in 9 seasons. I just can't get around that when we're talking about, I think he's the SP 18 in ADP. That's going to go down because he said the plan is to be ready for opening day. He dealt with a shoulder issue all of last season that he pitched really well in the postseason. Had some high-profile moments in the World Series especially, but they are going to slow play him this spring. We already know Blake Snell comes with a lot of risk, not just in terms of health, only 2 seasons of 130 innings in 9 in the majors, but also just super volatile profile statistically. I guess the question for me with Blake Snell, knowing that he dealt with that shoulder injury last season, he's going to be slow played. Every Dodgers pitcher, I look at it this way. If Blake Snell throws 20 innings next season, but those 20 innings or let's say 50 innings, but those 50 innings are 20 in September and 30 in October, Dodgers view that as a win. They will take that every single time. I just don't think they're going to push these guys, and I worry about that with Blake Snell. I worried about it with Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who threw a ton of innings last season, is pitching in the World Baseball Classic, had the shoulder injury in 2024. So we'll talk about Blake Snell first, but I would love to get your thoughts on Yamamoto's risk because he is kind of on an island in ADP. I think he's the number 4 SP, and it's 26.4, basically right in the middle of Garrett Crochet and Christopher Sanchez as the SP5. So, Dr. Lyman, what are your thoughts on Snell coming into the season, and then some thoughts on Yamamoto as well?
Yeah, shoulders always worry me, as I mentioned several times already, especially with pitchers. And I think in Snell's case, he does have a long history of not staying healthy. And so, So if it's a deep discount and IL slots, we've had that conversation already tonight. But I probably won't own him anywhere. And but that's just been my MO with Blake Snell for a long time.
How low would the price, like if he's SP 30 by the time March rolls around, would you take the chance? You're probably talking about like a 100th, 110th pick in your draft. Even that, even that makes me feel a little itchy. I don't love that.
That's not even close to low enough for me.
Okay, right, I would agree.
What about Dave? Let's get some Yamamoto thoughts because I know you're not in on the WBC guys, right?
Well, I was actually curious to hear what Dr. Lyman thought about it, but I mean, there's been a lot of evidence suggesting that pitchers who pitch in the WBC struggle that season. In season, I mean, if you think about they're getting off of their regular routine in the off season. They're ramping up earlier than usual. They're they're throwing a lot of high stress innings. Not a lot of innings, but they're throwing high stress innings in March where they're usually not. I just think logically it follows that it's a negative if your pitchers are pitching in the WBC. And like you previously mentioned with Yoshi, not only did he pitch like 200 innings in the regular season, plus another like 36 in the postseason, I believe, and now he's pitching in the WBC too. And he's going in the second round, I think.
Second round, yeah.
I mean, I'm not touching that. No way.
Yeah, my feeling is with the WBC is if you have an innings estimate for that pitcher for the season, take those WBC innings out of that estimate.
Okay.
And so discount them by that amount, because that's probably what's going to end up happening, where they need some time off at some point during the season, if it's just for some maintenance, a skip start here and there. But now, as a Japan resident, I have to say that Yoshi's amazing, and I wish him all the success in the world. But I would be cautious with using a second round pick on a pitcher that threw that much last season and is going to pitch in the WBC this spring.
The Dodgers do use a 6-man rotation, though.
Yep. I was going to say the exact same thing.
That is something. It's not enough to get me on board, but it is. They do kind of regulate his innings.
But that is the other side of that is Christopher Sanchez could throw 195 innings this season. I think that's what he got to last year. Yoshinobu Yamamoto is not getting to 180. You just do the math on pitching every 6th day instead of every 6th or 7th day instead of every 5th day. The Game 7 appearance in relief was the first time that Yoshinobu Yamamoto has ever thrown on less than 5 full days of rest since he got to the majors. I assume it's also the same in Japan because they they only pitch every 6th day there as well. That is something to keep in mind with Astros pitchers as well, because I would think Tatsuya Imai is going to be pitching every 6th day. The Cubs have done a very good job of keeping Imanaga every 6th day. That's just kind of the reality of these guys coming over from Japan, as exciting as they are. It changes how teams have to use them, so it puts a ceiling on how many innings you can get from them, even in a best-case scenario. So Yamamoto feels like a floor play to me, and I don't think you should draft the number 4 SP for a high floor. I think you should be looking for someone with 200 inning, 210 strikeout potential, and I just don't think Yamamoto has that. Let's move on to I'm going to skip around a little bit because I want to talk about George Kirby, who dealt with the shoulder injury last spring, came back, and his arm slot was lower. And now I know Eno Saris at The Athletic has talked a little bit about, some pitchers are intentionally lowering their arm slot because it might put less stress on the joints and might be a way to keep healthy. In Kirby's case, though, and Dr. Lyman, I'd love your thoughts on this. When it happens coming off of an injury, that suggests to me that he just wasn't quite right. Not that he was pitching through the injury, but just he wasn't himself. Does that seem like a fair assumption?
It's really hard to say because
Sure.
if working with his medical team and with his pitching coach, if they determine that he was able to throw without discomfort from that arm slot, then that just might be his new reality. I guess we'll see what he's doing in spring, if that continues, or if he's going to be back to where he was before. I'm not a biomechanist, so I can't really speak to whether or not that puts less strain on the joints or not, but it's certainly something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, that he's one of the pitchers this spring, George Kirby, that I really want to keep an eye on. Just like the thing for me was his splitter or changeup, whichever one you want to call it. It's been splitter the last couple of years. It was never like a super important pitch. He threw it around 10% of the time. Last season, he really didn't throw either the splitter or the changeup at all, but he tried. And that was the thing for me where it was like, okay, something's not quite right because he's trying to throw the splitter and he can't quite get over it because you probably want to be, more over the top on the ball. And if he's throwing from a lower arm slot, he's probably going more sidearm. And he experimented with getting the changeup that he used to throw back. Neither really worked. And so that's what I want to watch with George Kirby, even if the splitter was not this super important pitch for him in general. What about Isaac Paredes, who he's got some playing time concerns in Houston that are keeping his price low, but the theory on, hey, Isak Paredes is going to be a 30 homer guy in Houston, it was sound. He was on pace for that before that hamstring injury. He came back for the final week of the season. Is there any reason after a long offseason to be concerned about Isak Paredes being limited by that hamstring in 2026?
I would not be worried about it.
No.
Good. Love to hear that. I think he is one of the best picks in any drafts this year, assuming Houston could just figure this out and keep him and get him everyday playing time. They've talked about playing him in the outfield maybe. They've talked about playing him at second base. All of the above. I would love it. Let's just get him in the lineup. And if I happen to get second base and outfield eligibility out of Isak Paredes, all the better. Love that for me. Let's talk about Anthony Santander, who 44 homers in 2024 was one of the best picks in fantasy. 2025, he was just completely wrecked by injuries. He had the shoulder issue. He dealt with back and hip injuries as well. They are still talking about him on the Blue Jays as if he's an important part of their team for 2026. Fantasy players are not treating him as if he will be an important part of the Blue Jays. His ADP is 214 for a guy who had 3 straight 30-homer seasons. Dave, where are you at on Anthony Santander? Do you think buying the dip makes sense this year?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he just kind of was plagued by shoulder, back, and hip injuries last year.
Mm-hmm.
None of them really super concerned me moving forward. Like, I mean, he's a flyer, right? Like, you can't depend on him. But
yeah,
going around pick like 240, yeah, I like that as like a late power pick.
I want to jump around a little bit. Ellie De La Cruz was miserable in the second half. He had that. It's always so funny when we get I think their GM said in an interview that he had a torn quad, a quad tear. And then later on he backtracked and he was like, no, it was a strain. I misspoke. And it's like, well, I understand that's actually the same thing and people just react differently to tear versus strain. My assumption is that his bad second half and the lower stolen bases and everything was fully a result of the quad. Are you guys in on Ellie this year?
Yeah, I
so
would
my
not.
question is, do you think that does lasting damage, Dr. Lyman, when you play through a quad tear or strain for several months?
It's a sort of injury that does heal with rest. So I guess I would take a look at him in spring training, but generally I would not expect lower performance from him again this year.
A couple of guys who dealt with multiple oblique injuries, Adley Rutschman and Wyatt Langford. Obliques are just, for hitters especially, they seem to be such tough injuries. That is one where the player says, I'll be back in 4 weeks. I'm saying you'll be back in 7 weeks. Because that just, like I said, it's all rotational. So if you can't rotate without pain, you're not going to be able to play. And so I am optimistic about Adley Rutschman and Wyatt Langford. Are you guys in on bounce backs for those guys?
Langford had 4 different oblique strains last year, so
including one in spring, I believe.
Yeah, that's brutal. It's really starting to sound like his swing is a problem, and that does concern me.
Hey guys, I've been leaning on my arm the entire time watching this, and do you think I'm gonna be okay to type this year?
Rotator cuff.
You okay? I actually do think I have carpal tunnel. Anyway, hi guys.
Well, you got a desk job. We all have carpal tunnel.
I know. It's a real problem. How dare you say those things about Cole Reagans? And he was just so good, though. He was just, he was feeling amazing.
Arguably the best pitcher in baseball on a per inning basis last year.
I got to ask Steven really quickly. So you're saying a rotator cuff thing. He came back and they said it's A-okay and he looked great. What you're saying, though, is that there's some issue that wasn't assessed in some way that is going to reappear.
No, it's just that the rotator cuff doesn't, it's not a tissue that heals. That injury doesn't really heal without treatment. And so every time he throws a baseball, there's micro trauma to the joint. And so it's more of a when, not if.
So what was the process of the IL then? What was happening? What was recovering and healing during that?
So with the shoulder, what you're trying to do is get the inflammation to calm down so that the shoulder is no longer painful. Like I mentioned during my earlier comments, I have a rotator cuff injury. My shoulder doesn't bother me all the time. It bothers me when I try to throw a baseball because I've dealt with the inflammation and I just don't use it the way that I used to. But he has to use it. right? He doesn't have
Right.
a choice. So, but some guys, you know, they pitch for several seasons with you know, small tears in the rotator cuffs, and it might be their elbow that finishes them or something else. But you know, I would just when you're buying at that ADP, I'd be a little bit worried about somebody. Great talent when he's on the field, but how many innings is he going to be?
We will get you that pitching is attrition shirt.
I
Whether
appreciate
you
that.
know, I dropped the ball on that from last year, and then I'll give it to Dr. Dave. But really, Chris, Steven, Dave, you guys are the best. Thank you so much, really, for being a part of this fantastic
us,
panel.
Nick.
And
Appreciate it.
yeah,
Thank you.
that was amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for having us. Thanks.